Let's give them an example. We've talked a lot the last few weeks about how to find a deal, how to structure a deal, the art of negotiating, and then some of the legal aspects of it, of wholesaling real estate. Um, you mentioned, let's give an example tonight of what that looks like. Take us through the process. And then with our key theme of people over profit and
Yeah.
what that can do if you keep that in mind, because you've got a awesome story of what happened when you serve somebody well through wholesaling real estate. So can you take us through that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a list that I'd pulled, and the list was kind of older. It wasn't just a brand new hot list, but I continued to call this list and follow up with these people. And I had this little lady that I'd got in contact with, and her husband had passed away a while back. She inherited a house, and it was just sitting vacant. It had been vacant for about 3 years. Nice brick home, and I called her and I said, hey, I'm interested in your property. Was wondering if you'd be interested in selling. And she said, well, I might be. I said, okay, well, can I meet you sometime? Well, I went through the process, give me a little bit of information. She gave me some, but it wasn't a lot of information. She was kind of hesitant to talk to me, and I really couldn't get much out of her on the phone. So I knew at that point, I was like, well, look, can I just come by and see it? She said, sure. So she said, I'll meet you over there at whatever time. It was after I had to meet her after work, so I think it was like 4:30. And I called her at like 3 and that following day, and I said, hey, I just wanted to check and see if you're going to be able to meet me at 4:30. She was actually at the hospital. Her grandson was in the ICU. He had gotten he had diabetes and had a diabetic attack of some sort. But they were already planning on leaving. They had been visiting him for a while, so they just planned on coming over and meeting him. Well, I didn't know this scenario at the time. So they meet me at the house, and we're going through the house, and we're talking. I'm asking questions. It's a nice little brick home on a slab, 3-bedroom, 1 bath, and cobwebs are everywhere. I mean, it's sitting vacant for a while, and I'm asking questions. I'm like, oh, well, where are you from? And she's from Aberdeen. I said, oh, y'all drove all the way from Aberdeen up here to show me this house? And she's like, no. Our grandson's in the hospital. And that's where I started to find out that he was in ICU. And we're standing in this living room, cobwebs hanging onto our shoulders because there's so much, and they're telling me about the grandson. And being the religious guy, I just told her, I was like, well, is it okay if we just pray for him right now? And we all stood around this living room with cobwebs and holding hands, praying for her grandson. So we go through that process, and we talk some more, and I never did ask a price. I didn't really, at that point, I didn't feel like it was appropriate really for me to talk to her about price. We had kind of made a more of a personal connection with her about her grandson, and I got to see the property. That's really, at that point, that's all that I needed to do, and hopefully everything was going to go well with her grandson. So I told her I'd call her in a couple of days. I called her in a couple of days, and I asked her again, how her grandson was doing, and he had done great. He done actually come out of ICU, gotten into a hospital bed, and come home in that time. So he was doing good. So I told her, I said, well, great. Well, I know we had talked about the house, and that was the whole point of us going up there and meeting to begin with. Would you be interested in selling it? And if so, can you give me an idea of what you're looking for? And she really wouldn't give me a price. Well, I knew my numbers. So it wasn't in the best neighborhood. It was in an okay neighborhood. It was right there on the edge. It was on the verge of being in the bad neighborhood. But I knew the house was probably worth about $60,000 fixed up, So I knew I couldn't be in the $45,000 range. I need to be somewhere in the $25,000, $30,000 range to be able to get the house at a deal, but then also be able to help her, because it's just sitting there. She owned it free and clear. she's paying taxes on it every year. You know, it's costing her money, really. She's having to pay insurance on it. So it was costing her money, and she just didn't really know what to do with it. So she gave me a number. We kind of talked back and forth, and I was open with her. I told her, you know, look, you know, me and some investors of mine, you know, we have to get the houses at a certain amount of money to make it viable. And I told her just basically my number. And she said, you know, she said, that would work for us. She said, if I look at it long term, she said, I've been sitting on this property for years now. The last renters I had in it were terrible, and it's just been sitting vacant, and we've been paying in taxes on it. So everything worked out good. Got that house under contract, and I think I sold that contract. You know, I didn't make a huge spread on it, which was fine, but I was able to help her, and then I made a little bit of money, and then the person that bought it, they made good money on it too. Well, in that process, you know, we continued to talk, and I would check on her. I'd call and check on her. She was sweet as pie. And what you laughing at, Corey?
Because we keep throwing out each week. There's a new Mississippi term.
Oh, okay.
We throw out. What was last week?
Green as a gourd.
Yeah, gourds, man.
Yeah.
Green as some gourds. Turnip greens. Come on now, let's go.
So, so I had called her one day, and she said, "Sean, no, we had closed, or we were slated to close on her house." And she said, "Sean," she said, "would you be interested in coming to my 80th birthday party?" And I said, "Well, you know, I would love to." And so I told my wife, I was like, "Come on, babe." I said,
you went to this lady's 80th birthday party?
Yes. All right. So this, and I told my wife, I was like, all right, one day she had told me the date. It was on I want to say it was a Saturday, Friday evening or a Saturday or something. And she was having it at her church. And so I told my wife, I said, come on, we're going to go to, I don't want to tell her name, but we're going to this lady's birthday party. And me and Taylor and Jordan and B all went to her birthday party in Aberdeen. Now, Aberdeen's probably 35, 40 minutes away, so we're driving a pretty good little piece, you know. And my wife's like, I don't know this lady, you know. And anyway, so we get there, and I didn't tell everybody this, but she's African American, and like I said, she's sweet as she can be, you know. And so we get there, and it's at a church. Well, we are the only Caucasian people that come up in this church, and we come in, and they bring us in, love on us, give us food. We danced, had a blast. Okay, just had a really good time, and as I'm leaving. And the whole point, I mean, I had no idea what she was going to do. I really earnestly just wanted to go hang out with her on her 80th birthday. It was fun, you know? And so as I'm leaving, she asked me, she said, hey, Sean, she said, are you interested in buying land? And I said, yes, ma'am, I'll look at anything. She's like, okay, I'm gonna meet you next week. Let's meet you over there at that house, the house that she had sold us. And let's look over this land. I said, okay, fine. So we get over there that following week, and she brings out a plat, and it's two sections of land. So there's a highway, and then there's a section of land on one side, and there's a section of land on the other side. And it's 22.76 acres, 22.76 acres or something like that. And she says, hey, this is the land. She said the highway bought a section straight through the middle. It used to be more, but they had purchased a section through the middle. And I said, okay, well, I'd be interested in it. And I asked her what she wanted for it. And she brings out the tax paperwork where she had been paying taxes on it and what the tax valuation on it was. And the tax valuation was $6,800. And I said, Miss So-and-so, I said, is that what you sure that's what you want? And she said, yep. She said, the highways didn't come through. They've paid me good for my property. And she said, this is what I want to sell it for. And I said, well, if that's the case, yes, ma'am, I'll take it. And I said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I said, whatever we do with the property, I will take care of you after I figure out what I'm going to do with it. And she said, well, you don't have to worry about that. And I said, yes, ma'am. You just let me do that. So, so with that said, it's 22 acres for $6,800. Okay. And,
And then one more time.
Yeah. 22 acres for $6,800.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, we go through the process. Come to find out, she had, with her previous marriage, her husband that had passed away, her deceased husband, had 2 children. Well, he didn't have a will. And because he didn't have a will, they then have equitable rights to the property. Okay. So, and they have no idea the property even existed. And so, we go through the title search and we find this out through the title search. Okay. And my title attorney said, Sean, we have an issue. And I said, well, okay, let's figure this issue out. And so I called her and I asked her, I said, hey, just a quick question. Do you have a couple of kids? And she's like, no, my deceased husband had some kids. And I said, okay, do you know how to get in touch with him? She said, I have no idea. I haven't talked to him in years. And, the son had some major issues and so anyway, so here starts the process. So then I get on Facebook. She gives me the names of them. I get on Facebook and I start searching every person with those names. And I'm messaging everybody and their mama and saying, hey, do you know this person? I'm trying to reach them, blah, blah, blah. I've got some land and I want to give them some money. So I know what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to pay them for their portion of the property. Okay. So we continue to go through this, and finally, out of nowhere, after a couple of weeks of me hitting dead ends, this lady calls me and she said, hey, I'm Chris's sister. Well, this is the daughter of the person I'm looking for.
Hey, Sean,
and I said,
I'm sorry, pause you there for a second. We've got some new people watching, and I just want to catch them up on this story real quick. So, so you found this deal, right?
Yeah.
And this lady, and you find out that her grandson isn't doing well, and they're in the hospital, ICU, and you decide to go to the ICU with them, right? And then you take a look at the house and all that good stuff, and the lady, she's a different race than you, and she invites you to her 80th birthday party, and you take your wife and your kids to the lady that you don't really know.
Yeah.
80th birthday party to celebrate that, man. That's awesome. And I know you, I know your heart that, I mean, you probably really enjoyed it and you added value in those kind of things. And the house is a secondary thing, right?
Yeah.
So you continue to stay in touch with her and all those kind of things. And you find she comes to you and says, hey, I want to sell you some land, 22 acres for $6,800.
Yeah.
And you've talked about, struck that deal. Come to find out, she has her deceased husband had some kids who might have some rights to it, and that's kind of where you're at into the story now. Had a hard time finding them. Boom, get a call out of the blue. So
get a call out of the blue, and she said, "Hey, I'm Chris's sister," and I said, "Well, listen, so and so has some land that your dad had given her ownership over with a deed. But the problem is because when he passed away, he did not have a will. And so you guys have some ownership in this property, and so-and-so is selling it for X amount of dollars. Well, because of that, you guys get a third. So she gets a third, y'all, and you and your brother get a third. And so I want to be able to pay you guys out." And so I explained to him everything. And she said, well, my brother is in drug rehab in North Carolina. And I said, do you know how to get in touch with him? 3 days later, the brother calls me and says, "Hey, I hear you got some money for me." And I said, "Well, maybe, we need to go through this process." And, because they had to sign a quit claim deed to transfer the property over and all that. So here was the deal. The brother had no money. He had gotten out of rehab those 2 days after, and his sister had gotten in touch with him, had no money, had no way to get down here. So what I did is I bought him a Greyhound bus ticket. I also wired him some cash so that he could get food so he could eat on the way down. And he comes down on the Greyhound bus. His sister comes up from South Mississippi, drives up, and I go pick him up at the Greyhound bus station. I got a picture of him, of us in the truck together. And then we go close this deal on this land. Now, they have not seen their stepmom in I don't know how many years, and she was nervous. So we're sitting at the closing table, and they had this just really cool family reunion and got to talk about some stuff. It was really neat to see. And then I took Chris to go see his mother, his real mother that he hasn't seen in 8 years, to Morville to go see her. And he goes and visits her for a while. And I just stay in the truck and chill. And then I take him back to Tupelo, and he gets himself a hotel room. Okay. So by this time he had gotten a check, and I was able to take him somewhere and get it cashed, and everything turned out really good. But the whole point of this whole story was there was a lot of moving parts. But I don't think I ever would have had that opportunity if I honestly wouldn't have cared about, number one, our grandson that was in the hospital to begin with, and honestly care about him. And then two, honestly want to go hang out with her on her 80th birthday, because we had gotten to know each other. And again, this business is about people. And you meet the coolest people, and you gain friendships, and even after this, everything had happened, there's been times where I've wanted to do deals with people and they thought I was a little bit sketchy. And I would say, "Hey, I'm going to give you a phone number. Call this lady and ask her about me." And every time they would call me back and say, "You've got a deal."
Yeah, it's kind of like that's awesome, man. There were a couple of things I heard in there. One, our whole theme and what we've been talking about is people over to profit and having your intentions pure. But then two, so many people would have easily said, this isn't going to work out. There's too much trouble. I'm not going to be able to find the son and those kind of things. I mean, you made it happen though, right? You said, okay, this is the problem. He doesn't have any money. He's got to get down here. He has no way. What's at least one thing I can do? How can I solve this problem, right? Yeah. There's always more than one way that you can get it done. And you figured out how to make it happen. And doing some deals together too, I've seen you do that multiple times where it's not always this can't be done, but there's how can we figure out a way to make it happen? So anyway, I'd be curious to hear what's your biggest takeaway from that story you just shared about you.
I don't know, that I can't dance, because I found that out at the birthday party.
Yeah. So found out that you didn't have any dance moves, huh?
Yeah. Them folks wore me out. I'm gonna tell you, taught me some stuff.
Did you and Brittany get out there and try to dance?
I tried to.
Brittany didn't?
No, you know my wife.
Oh no, come on. Oh, that's funny.
She's too shy.
That's good stuff. So tell everybody, have you been able to sell the land? Do you still own the land? What's the follow-up to that?
Yeah, so the land was broken up into two sections. I actually sold 18 acres of it for $48,000.
Bought it for $6,800.
Yeah. And then I have the other 6 acres that's commercial land listed right now for around $100,000. But I'm kind of on the fence. If it sells, it sells. If it doesn't, I'm going to hold it because it's in a prime location where in 3 years it'll be worth even more.
Yeah. So even at the 100 that you have it listed at, it's still a good spot. That's a um, very good location, commercial location, tons of traffic right there. Perfect for probably a gas station or something, I would think. Something like
Yeah.
a convenience store or something. So, yeah. What do you, another deal? Do you have a quick and one more quick example? We're kind of coming up on our time here, and I would love to see if anybody has any Q&A. But do you have any other interesting deals that you've had happen?
Um, yeah, I need to get my book. I've actually tried to write these down because over time you kind of forget some of the things that you've done. I had a lot. Now this is kind of going back. Had a lot that I tell you what, I've got a good one. So I'd gotten this house, found this house, and I'd talked to this guy multiple times, and he just wasn't coming off the price like I needed him to. Good guy. He had put a lot of work into the house already. It didn't need a ton of work. It was perfect for somebody to flip. And so I said, look, I can't give you what you're wanting for the house, but I kind of have an idea what the house is worth. So if I went in and I put my own money into the property and then listed it and sold it, could I pay you on the backside? And he said, that might work. So I got this thing under contract. He continued to pay the agreement was he was going to pay the mortgage. He was going to pay all the utilities. So I had no expenses. All the expenses I had was I needed to put the money into the house, and then we were going to sell it on the back end.
Yeah.
And that was my intent. And I got to run my mouth at church to a realtor that I knew. And so about it, I was just telling them because I was excited about the deal, because it's kind of out of the box kind of deal. It's not something that somebody that you do every day, anyway. So he called me up and he's like, "Hey, Sean, would you just sell the house like it is?" And I said, "Maybe." And he said, "Well, I've got somebody that might be interested in buying it." Well, ended up, I didn't put any money in it and made like $11,000 wholesale fee to selling it to another guy that was going to flip it and do the exact same thing that I did, or was it that I was going to do. And he made a great profit too, but it was thinking outside the box to even get the deal, because ultimately if I only had the wholesale mentality, I probably would have never even have gotten that house under contract. I would have let it go, because the numbers to me didn't work.
Yeah.
But to somebody else, they did.
Yeah. So being open-minded, right? I'd love to hear any Q&A. I know Facebook kind of keeps us about 10 seconds behind what we actually are live. So if you have any Q&A, any questions about wholesales, flips, anything like that, Sean would love to answer. No, we'd love to answer. While you're thinking of that, one of the things that jumps out to me is kind of a recent deal that we did. There's nothing too unique about it except for it was a 2-house package, right? But one of the houses wasn't a house; it was a church. we bought a house and a church, and Sean posted the church on Facebook, and we had that thing rented out in a day, right? And we were kind of wondering if that would actually rent out, but this thing was awesome. Like, it had the pews, and it had the stage, it had the soundboard in the back. Man,
it had everything.
Yeah, he was ready to go.
Ready to go.
Like, I thought Sean was going to become a preacher after that and have his own congregation.
I couldn't find the rattlesnakes.
So there you go. That's it. That's a recent interesting one. And
and that's kind of out of the box kind of deal too, right?
Yeah.
It was a house and a church. We got both of them for a good deal. And
we bought it from the bank.
We bought it from the bank, and we'll make pretty decent money on it. And what we ended up doing is we leased that church out as a lease option purchase. So we're leasing it for a couple of years, and then we're going to sell it. And they have full intentions. But not only that, our intent, again, this goes right back to what we were talking about before, is people over profit.
Yeah.
When we first thought about that church, really that church could rent it out for probably $900 a month.
Mm-hmm.
But talking about it, we said, look, let's help a church get started, rent it out for whatever, $450 or whatever we rented it out for, something really cheap. And I think that's one reason why it rented so fast. But two, I think Corey, it was because of our intention. It was the intent.
Yep. And kind of the end goal with that one is we're working on the house right now, flipping it and sell it and have the church free and clear. So
yeah,
that's kind of the plan there. Well, Sean, I do not see any Q&A right now. Brad Wilkerson, he said, "You're not sketchy, you're just stingy." So
look, I'm going to have to, you just wait, Brad. I'm going to get you on these now because Brad's a good guy. He's really helped us out, but I'm going to have to get on him a little bit.
Brad, I think he might, he said he may be starting to be stingy with who works on the houses. I don't know, but I'm playing. Well, Sean, man, any last things that you want to share? Any last thoughts?
Be creative. Be creative. Be willing to not just when you're first starting in wholesaling. It gets a little bit daunting because there's a lot of stuff that you're just learning. But what I would say do is get the basics, but be open to all different avenues, and then get somebody that's willing, me or you or somebody else that's willing to kind of guide you and lead you, so that you can see things out of the box. It's not so cut and dry. There are plenty of deals out there that a lot of other people have tried to get, that they couldn't because they were cut and dry. But if you're a little bit open, if you're a little bit willing to think a little bit outside the box, you can gain a whole bundle of deals that maybe some other people couldn't do.
Right. And always be willing to go to an 80-year-old's birthday party. So
and dance.
All right. Well, Sean, man, that was awesome. And we've been talking the last couple of weeks too about we're doing a 6-day challenge coming up. We should be getting that information out pretty soon. It's a 6 figures to 6-day challenge in wholesaling real estate. And we'll be taking 6 days to dive deep into 6 steps that Sean used to build a 6-figure business, all while working full-time, all the while being a full-time dad and a full-time spouse. So be looking forward to that. And anyway, you guys have a great night, and God bless. Thank you.
See ya.